I'm going to talk about easy WordPress security for everyone. And I purposefully have absolutely no code whatsoever anywhere in this presentation. I figure if I'm going to have the words easy and for everyone in here, then it should probably be those things. I am a happiness engineer and a WordPress instructor. I work at Flywheel as a happiness engineer. That's what we call our support team. And so I spend my days helping people solve their WordPress problems. And occasionally in the evenings, I help students learn WordPress. I think some of my students might be in this room. Yeah, there's Will. Hey, Patrick. All right. A few others are in the other room, but I won't hold that against them. That's fine. Whatever. But over the course of teaching people WordPress and helping people out with their WordPress problems, I've started to realize a lot of people think that WordPress security is a very complicated thing. And certainly you can get very granular with it. You can go very in-depth and do some very complex things to keep your sites safe. I'm not going to talk about any of those things because 90 to 99% of WordPress security is very simple, and it's just done preventatively. Oh yeah, this is, you might have seen our booth out there. I'm sure you've seen lots of us running around. Flywheel's mission statement is right here. We help designers do what they love. And what that means to us on the support team is we take care of the things you don't want to mess with. And security is one of those things. Interface, by the way, interfaceschool.com is the URL. There's an advanced WordPress development course along with a number of others there. So if you're looking to learn more about the development of WordPress, or if you just think the idea of hanging out with me 3 nights a week sounds good, you can head over there, check that course out. I realized in retrospect this is going to be kind of a mean slide. But there are 2 questions about security that pop up more often than any others. A few people, really smart people, ask, how can I make my site more secure? What can I do to keep my site safe? How can I preemptively be working on making sure nothing happens? And the other question is, can you clean my malware up for me? Those are the 2 main questions that we get. And as long as you're asking the first question, you shouldn't ever have to ask the second one. WordPress security is easier than people think. It's, like I say, you can get really deep into it, like most things about WordPress, right? You can get really deep into development. You can get really deep into SEO. But the surface level stuff is really actually really easy to take care of, but I just think people just don't know where to start. So that's what I'm going to aim at here, is giving you an idea of where to start and those easy things that everybody can be doing and really everybody probably should be doing to keep their sites safe. So 3 main points. I want to talk about some misconceptions that go around about WordPress security, because I think to know how to keep your site safe, you kind of have to understand what you're up against and how the hacks and that kind of thing kind of work. Why this is important for everyone. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone who touches a WordPress site, whether you're a developer or designer, or whether you're somebody who is going to be on the client side, just adding content, you own your own site. Like, anybody who touches the site, it matters for all of them. I'll touch on that, and then I'll give you the good part that you probably actually came for, which is the suggestions, some of the easy things that you can actually do to help keep your site safe. So first off, common WordPress security misconceptions. There's a myth that hackers or bad people, I keep using the term hackers in this slide presentation as like a catch-all for just anybody who wants to do anything shady with your site. I might not actually mean hackers, that's really what I mean. But there's sort of a misconception that as long as you're not like Amazon.com, as long as you don't have somebody's credit card information on your site, as long as you're not storing like your social security number on your site, nobody's going to want it, right? You don't have anything that's really intrinsically valuable on your site. It's just, you know, an info page for a client or some contact info or something like that. So nobody wants anything to do with it. It's not going to matter. But the truth is, I kind of like this phrase to sort of explain it. Just because your car doesn't have a nice stereo doesn't mean a thief has no use for it. And to further illustrate this, I want to show this. Somebody else mentioned this earlier. This is that DDoS, distributed denial of service attack, that happened on DNS servers about 2 weeks ago. Knocked out a huge part of the internet. Technically didn't knock it out, just made it so you couldn't access anything. Spotify, I can't even remember tons of huge sites, Zendesk was down. And this map kind of shows you these huge outages. How this was done, why this happened, was that some person or some group of people got together and they figured out the default usernames and passwords for a ton of IoT devices, Internet of Things. So your internet-connected Blu-ray player or TV or refrigerator or microwave or whatever it may be. They just got all the default username and passwords for these devices and tried connecting to thousands of them. And we're able to, because lots and lots of users don't ever change the username and password. They just stick with whatever it ships from the factory as. Once they were in, they weren't trying to steal information. They weren't trying to get anything valuable. They weren't trying to burn your Pop-Tarts or whatever. They were just using these devices to all connect at the same time to a single DNS server, which knocked it out, which just overloaded it and made it so that it was absolutely inaccessible to everybody, thereby creating the outage you see on your screen. I bring that up because I just want you to know this is just one of many examples why people aren't just after your data. People, the bad guys of the web, the villains out there, they aren't trying just to get something specifically valuable from you. They can use your site in lots of ways, in very much the same way that a thief could use your car, even if your car is an ugly brown '88 Buick Century. I used to own that car. There's sort of a common, I hope this one maybe doesn't permeate this room because we all love WordPress, probably is why we're here, but there's a myth that WordPress itself is vulnerable to hacks, that you can't trust it. We probably have all heard stories about WordPress sites or plugins or themes or whatever that have vulnerabilities, but it's not vulnerable, it's popular, and that's an important distinction. It should also be noted, I don't have a slide for this, but you should know that the WordPress core itself, like WordPress as a CMS itself, extremely, extremely secure. Where the vulnerabilities happen are almost always either with passwords or with out-of-date plugins and themes where a vulnerability is discovered and then users just don't update. To illustrate why WordPress itself is a target, of the top 10 million or so sites on the internet, 1 in 4 is run on WordPress, roughly. And we qualify that with the top 10 million because at a certain point you just start hitting a bunch of spam sites. But for all intents and purposes, of the sites on the internet that anybody really has any use for, there's about a 25% chance that it's a WordPress site. That makes it really the biggest game in town. So if you're a hacker or whatever, of course you're going to be going after it. Of course you're going to be trying to exploit vulnerabilities in the biggest thing, but that doesn't make that thing any more vulnerable than anything else. In fact, because WordPress is open source, any problem that arises gets fixed by a gigantic community of people. And like I say, the WordPress core itself, extremely secure. It has not had any issues in a very, very long time. This one kind of piggybacks onto the first one, but there's sort of a widespread misunderstanding about hacks, and people tend to think they're personal in some way. Like there's a guy out there on the web, in I don't know, Russia or something, comes across your website and is like, "Ooh, I'm gonna get this guy." Okay, that doesn't happen. There is almost never anybody on the other side. Hacks are not personal. Nobody's going after your site personally. Just like in that DDoS attack that I talked about earlier, nobody was after your DVR or TV or whatever. Like nobody was targeting you specifically. Hacks aren't personal, and in fact, there's rarely even another person on the other end of hack. What happens with hacks most of the time, and this is especially true of the things that happen with WordPress, is somebody has built a bot. a soulless bot. Sorry, bot, but you have no soul. And this bot is just a piece of software, really, that's programmed to scour the internet for WordPress sites. Once it comes across one, it knows that it can find the login screen for that WordPress site at /wp-admin, because that's the default loading screen, the default login screen for any WordPress site. So it's programmed to comb the web, find a WordPress page, try /wp-admin, and when it finds that, try all of the obvious logins that it knows. And it'll have these from a list of things that have worked in the past, things that people tend to use, things that just we being humans tend to choose because they're easy for us to remember, not realizing that things that are easy for us to remember tend to also be things that are easy to guess. None of this is personal in any way. And we'll talk a little bit more here shortly about how to thwart that kind of thing. The last thing is that people think, well, okay, that might happen. As long as I have a decent login, that's strong enough to keep hackers out. As long as your password is extremely secure, then yeah, that's probably okay. But you should know that bots are these things that people are programming. They're smart enough to comb the site and find things from the site and use that in their guesses. So if you have a site that's at guitarshop.com, this domain is for sale from somebody who probably wants a lot of money from it. A bot will always try to log in with the username admin. So if you can, you should definitely try to avoid having that be your actual username. But then they'll see keywords on the site, and they'll probably try guitar or guitar shop or shop admin or all of these things. And they'll also try to incorporate things from the site into your password, as well as common things that people use. Lots of research has shown that people use four-digit words beginning, or four-digit numbers beginning in 19 in their passwords an awful lot, because they will choose significant dates for themselves. The date they were born, the date they got married. This is becoming increasingly popular with four-digit numbers of 20 as well. So, and of course there's like the 1, 2, 3s and the exclamation points and the sort of leet speak or whatever we want to call it, like there in the bottom example. So those are some things that you might think about trying to avoid. I remember seeing a study once of millions of PIN numbers were leaked, the PIN codes that people choose for their ATMs. And it was just ridiculously like far and away, like nowhere even remotely close to equal distribution of all possible numbers, because the 1900 numbers made up like 75% of the overall. So just be aware. You're a human. You're to some degree predictable, and other humans know that. That all aside, though, if you take one thing away from this talk, it is that a strong password is absolutely the most important thing you can have in WordPress security, in online security, in any kind of digital security. I like to use this analogy. It doesn't matter how good your security system is if you don't lock the front door. Your password is locking the front door. You've got to make sure that that's in place before you can start worrying about all the other stuff. Your password should be the thing that you depend on. If nothing else works, your password should. With that, I'm going to spend a little time harping on this. I'm the evangelical preacher of strong passwords. Your password should always be 100% unique. You should never use the same password for anything else. If a bot gets into somewhere with a password, it's going to wind up being used somewhere else. If a bot gets into your Facebook using a certain password, it will probably start trying that password on email addresses, et cetera, et cetera. So don't reuse the same password multiple places. I would recommend at least 10 to 12 mixed characters. I personally like to go no lower than 16 and sometimes as high as 30. And it shouldn't really be readable English, because if it's readable English, it's guessable English. And lastly, it shouldn't be anything that anybody you know could guess. Not even if the world depended on it. ... I've come up with this little test. Does your password pass the alien test? And you're thinking two things right now. A, what is the alien test? And B, that is a cool little UFO icon. Yes, it is. Thank you. But you're also thinking that's the same antenna on top of the UFO icon that was on top of our little soulless robot earlier. And yes, it is. You're a very observational group. I appreciate that. It's all because the UFO and the soulless robot are both members of the Illuminati. Here's the alien test. Imagine for some weird reason your site's password has become Earth's last defense, right? This is an Independence Day scenario with no Will Smith or Bill Pullman, and your password is the only thing protecting the Earth. So the aliens know this, and they beam up everybody you've ever known. Why don't they beam you up? I don't know. Just go with it. But they beam up everybody you've ever known to try to get to your password. And if there's a chance that that would be successful, and a chance that all of those people in a room working together could hack your password, it is not strong enough. That might sound harsh, I realize, but especially you probably have somebody you share logins with. Maybe if you're married, you might have a spouse. You both use the same logins. That's okay, though, because if you haven't discovered these yet, my advice for literally everybody who uses technology is to use a password manager. And I mean the word literally. If you're not familiar, a password manager is software, just a program that will allow you to generate secure, absolutely, literally random passwords. It'll save them for you so you don't have to remember them. It'll enter them for you so you don't have to type them. All of your passwords are then just stored in this vault, and you only have one extremely strong master password to get into that vault. So anytime I want to log into a website, I just click my little password manager, I enter my master password, and it goes and finds the right username and password combo for that site and enters it for me. I have absolutely no idea what my password is for anything except that. All of my other passwords are 100% random. There is no way I could manually type my password into anything except my password manager, and that's how I know they're secure. There is, of course, one important caveat to that. Although you only have to remember one single password again, which frees up bandwidth, Will kind of mentioned freeing up mental energy. Anything you don't think about is mental energy you can use it elsewhere, and you probably spend a lot more time thinking about and typing and remembering and retyping passwords than you even realize. That's a wonderful thing about Password Manager. I highly recommend it for that reason. However, you have to realize that this does create a single point of failure. So your master password needs to be impressive. 7 letters worth of impressive. I'll let you imagine what that word is. Password managers, by the way, do allow you to share passwords. Like if you're married or if you have a family even, like maybe you want to share the Netflix account, the bank login, the whatever other things you want to share, you can actually have teams with password managers. And these are the two biggest ones. I actually use both of them for various things. I am a huge fan of LastPass, personally. It's $12 per year. That's $1 per month. When I first went to sign up, I actually thought it was $12 per month. And then I was still thinking about it. And then I realized it was $12 per year and thought, that's a pretty good price for never having to have an insecure login or remember one ever again. I'm pretty on board with that. 1Password, they both work fairly similarly. They both have great features. I highly recommend them both. But definitely, strongly recommend using a password manager. Get rid of those insecurities, generate random passwords, just save them, and free your mind up for other things. All right, so I guess we got kind of on a tangent there because that wasn't really about myths anymore. But why WordPress security matters for everyone. There are probably, actually go ahead and raise your hand. Are you a person who, you're just sort of, you do it all. You develop your own website, you have your own website, you're the person who puts content on it, like it's all you, you're a one-man show. Okay. Good deal. How many of you have one of these relationships? Maybe you don't make the site, but you're the client, or maybe you're the person who makes the site for a client. All right, cool. those are both very common scenarios in WordPress. There might be scenarios more like this as well. Maybe if you're a small shop or a small agency, there might be a designer and a developer working in tandem to deliver the content to the client, or maybe even in an agency scenario or a firm scenario, 4 people who are all touching the site, 3 of them probably before it goes live, 1 after it goes live, and it just goes on from there. And in a lot of larger situations, you might have something kind of like this, where you might have an entire design team, a copywriter, a dev team, a project manager, content manager. On the client side, there would be some post authors, maybe some editors, a site admin, maybe there would be content managers on the client side. But this is lots and lots and lots of people who touch a WordPress site, who have logins, who have an influence on what goes into this site and how it works. And it matters because everybody who touches a site is potentially a vulnerability. Everybody who touches a site could have a weak password. They could fail to update plugins that need to be updated, or they could install bad plugins. They could do any number of things. Anybody who has access to the site has to be viewed as somebody for whom security matters. This is a quote that I really like because Benjamin Franklin was talking about WordPress when he said it. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And if you've never heard that before, what it essentially boils down to is that it's easier to prevent a problem than to fix it. And this is a fundamental problem, well, not problem, it's a fundamental truth of life. It's always easier to stop a problem than it is to solve it after it's happened. Whatever that problem is, whether it's like, I don't know, it's easier to put gas in your car before it runs out. It's easier to exercise once in a while than to deal with obesity. It's easier to prevent malware from happening on your site than it is to clean it up afterwards. This is especially true of malware because, so you know, fun fact, when you download WordPress right now from WordPress.org, you are downloading 1,563 files and folders. That's what makes up WordPress, the file structure, just WordPress itself. Second fun fact, once you've installed WordPress right there, you will have 131 rows of data in your database, which might sound like a lot, but it grows exponentially from there. Most sites have thousands, some have millions. Third fun fact, major study found that around 40% of sites infected with malware become reinfected because the initial issue that caused the hack doesn't get fixed. And malware can target both files and database rows. So we are talking thousands and thousands and thousands of files and entries in the database that could potentially be affected by a hack. And not only that, but could actually be affected again, all other things being equal, 40% of the time. And fourth fun fact, I'm sorry, none of those facts were actually fun at all. That was irresponsible on my part. But here's how this kind of works and why this matters for everybody is if these people at the design agency, if they are implementing the proper security measures and they're passing them down the line to everybody who touches the site after that and saying, hey, we've got these login protections, we've got these security measures in place, it goes to everybody down the line, and by the time the site goes live, security is already in place and you're fine, you're good to go. It doesn't work backwards. If you try to add security after the site goes live, you have to kind of go back up the pipeline, tell everybody who's using the site, hey, I changed these things, stuff is going to work differently from now on, and by this point, something could have happened. Hopefully not. Most likely, if you haven't noticed a problem, there probably isn't one. But it's much, much easier to take care of security and get everybody on the same page up here than it is down here. WordPress security matters to everyone because everybody has the power to prevent. Not everybody can clean malware. Not a lot of people can. But everybody can help prevent it. So let's talk about how that actually happens, because I've been talking long enough about really scary doom and gloom stuff. So let's talk about what we can do as the good guys to keep this kind of stuff from happening. I'm going to recommend a few different plugins. You can find them all in the general WordPress plugin repository. You can either go to wordpress.org/plugins, or you can just search for them in WordPress itself when you're logged in. All of these are available for free to everybody. Did I mention I feel passionately about strong passwords? I don't know if this came up or not, but always use strong passwords, and a non-obvious username also helps. Please don't be admin. You can't actually change your login name in WordPress. It won't let you do that unless you're savvy with editing the database. But you can always create a new user and delete your old one. So ideally, a strong password is the most important part. Like, a weak username with a strong password is way, way, way better than the opposite. But ideally, both are something that isn't going to be on the top 5 guesses. If you have a site where lots of users might be logging in, posting content, you're not the only person on here, then you can force your users to use strong passwords with a plugin like this. It's just called Force Strong Passwords, and it will not allow users to have dumb little passwords like password 123 or something like that. Obviously, if you're the only user on the site, then you can take care of your own passwords. But if you don't have control, if people can create their own accounts or log in, or if they're, if they've got their own user, then this might be something you want to look into. This is one of my favorites. I love this. I love, love, love this tip, because I explained earlier how bots will go to a WordPress site and then just go to /wp-admin to try to hack their way into your site. You can move your login screen. You can change /wp-admin to something totally else entirely, so that they can't get in because they can't even find your login screen. WPS hide login. There are a number of plugins that do this. There are probably at least 5, 10, 20 out there. WPS hide login is the one that I use, and all it does, the only thing it does, is just change that /wp-admin URL to something else that you choose. So instead of that, you could use /OpenSesame, /knock-knock, hey, this is my super secure login page, will you now let me in, please, thank you. Whatever you want. Yes? In theory, this is a preventative. There are still, every one of these things is going to be a preventative for a certain level of sort of proficiency that you're fighting against. If you still have attempted logins after this, just out of curiosity, what plugin are you using? Do you know? Rename wplogin.php? Yeah, okay. That one is a good one, but it hasn't been updated in a very, very long time. So it is possible that maybe somebody discovered something in that code where they could find that. If somebody has access to your database, which if they do, they probably don't need to be logging in, I guess, so this doesn't really make that much sense, but they could ostensibly find that URL. They might be able to guess it using depending on what it is, the bot in question might be programmed to try a few different things that maybe it's scraped from the site or something like that. So it is certainly possible. This isn't a silver bullet, but what you're doing with these things is gradually upping the sophistication it's going to require to get near you. Okay, yeah, IP address restrictions, that's a really good example of one that's a little deeper than we're going into today. But yeah, absolutely. You can block certain IP addresses, or all IP addresses, but a few that you've whitelisted from getting into your WP admin by editing htaccess and various other things. So yeah, that's definitely an advanced step you can use. So obviously, if you have other people who are logging into your site, you have to communicate what you've changed this to them. But if somebody tries to go to WP-admin after this, they'll just get this blank screen, and the soulless bot won't actually be there. I added that. They'll just see this has been disabled, or you must log in, or something like that. They won't actually see the login screen. I love this plugin. Obviously, you should be preventing brute force attacks. A brute force being somebody, just basically the same thing we've been talking about, somebody repeatedly trying over and over and over again to log into your site. And it's important to put the kibosh on this because unlimited guesses is just certainty and a delay. If I can guess forever, I will get it sooner or later. A lot of hosts, especially good managed hosts, automatically do this for you. They will automatically implement this. If you're on a shared hosting environment, maybe you just got like a really plain vanilla, I don't know, Bluehost or something like that. There are tons and tons of plugins out there to help you with this. Limit login attempts has not been updated in a long time, but there are plenty of others available out there. As always with plugins, just check the ratings. The more the better, and the higher the better. But this is a fairly simple thing that you can implement pretty easily. What it'll do is if somebody tries to log in with the wrong username and or password, it will only give them so many attempts before it blocks them out. And usually it will, it operates by IP address, so the same person cannot try logging in again for a certain period of time, and that period of time will continue getting higher and higher the more failed logouts there are. Side note, tangent, as my students will tell you, I go on these a lot. Because these tend to be based on IP address, if you have a lot of people logging in from, say, your office, and 2 or 3 of them fail once, it's going to lock everybody out. So just be aware of that. You can change the settings for how many attempts it takes and that kinds of thing. Another big thing I like to recommend is adding CAPTCHA or something at least very similar to it to all site forms. The login screen is kind of the obvious place that people think of for that. And that's great. You should absolutely have something like that on your login screen. But any form, any place on your site where a user can send data. Because anytime you allow a user to enter a field and send you something, that is potentially a vulnerability. WordPress does a really awesome job and really good, contact form plugins and stuff like that. They do a great job of data sanitation, so people can't do anything really nasty, send you, code that's harmful or anything like that in a form most of the time. But you can just go that extra step to add CAPTCHA to that form, whether it's a contact form or whatever it might be that they're filling out on your site, to make sure that a human is actually sending it. And just, again, kind of up that bar of how sophisticated anybody who's trying to get at you would have to be. There are lots of plugins to do this. This is just the one I've generally used. It's nice and simple, but there are tons of them out there. There's reCAPTCHA by Google, which is nice. You can find all kinds of CAPTCHA plugins. I know nobody likes this. I know we all hate that little math problem or whatever it might be. Please don't use the one where it makes you like read an address off a pixelated JPEG or something like that. Those are awful. But hey, we can all brush up on our math skills once in a while, right? If it's in the name of security. By the way, while we're talking about plugins, quick note, just to protect yourself. It's great if you're adding plugins to increase your security, but plugins themselves, if you're not using them the right way, can also do harm. So please only use well-reviewed and well-maintained themes and plugins and from reputable sources. And ideally, you don't want to use a plugin that hasn't been updated in a very long time. And obviously, you shouldn't use one that only gets like 2 stars out of 100 reviews or something like that. The wonderful thing about the WordPress community is that it's big and everybody is open to helping you. So if you're not sure, just all you have to do is ask. People are more than happy to make their recommendations, tell you what they use, tell you what their experiences have been. There's tons of forums and meetups and all kinds of stuff for this. This was touched on earlier in the day, but don't use more plugins than you need for a few reasons. First off, they are a vulnerability if you don't update them. Even a plugin that is deactivated can still be a vulnerability. Just because it's not activated doesn't mean it's not, it can't be exploited if there's some vulnerability in its out-of-date code. So if you're not using it, just go ahead and delete it. And that'll be a performance boost too, because even an inactive plugin can suck up PHP memory and that kind of stuff. So just, you don't have to be like a plugin monk. You don't have to be totally minimalist, but don't use more than you need. And always, 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 always keep your plugins and themes updated. Because if it is discovered that there's something wrong with one of those plugins and themes, they'll issue an update. All you have to do is click the little icon and say, yep, update this. That's it. Beyond, I will say, bad passwords or weak passwords are by far and away the #1 biggest source of WordPress hacks, hands down. Or people being able to guess passwords, that kind of thing, brute force, all of those kinds of things having to do with logins. But behind that, outdated plugins and themes with exploits that have been discovered in them, #2. All you have to do is log into your site once in a while, not every day, not every hour, just once in a while, check for updates, just go ahead and click update. That's it. It's very, very easy. I know it's a little bit of a pain. Oh, any of you who here uses the Jetpack plugin? Not very many. Okay, so here's one of the really, really awesome things about the Jetpack plugin. It's made by Automatic. So Matt Mullenweg, WordPress.com. What Jetpack allows you to do is connect all of your WordPress sites where you have it installed to WordPress.com, so you can have a single dashboard through WordPress.com for all of your WordPress sites, and you can actually update plugins and themes from there. They have a really, really killer interface. It works great, and it's totally free. All you need to do is just have a WordPress.com account, which again is free. So you just install Jetpack, enter your WordPress.com credentials. There's even a mobile app and a desktop app for it. So you just, it's been referred to as the Calypso project or the WordPress app. You just pull it up and you can see all of your sites, all the things that need updating. You can do them all right there. And I think you can even set them to auto update. It's fantastic. Jetpack is awesome, you guys. End tangent. Two-factor authentication is another thing you can do that can be very, very effective. And it may be a little redundant with some of this other stuff because some of this other stuff does kind of act like two-factor authentication. But hey, if it's hard for you to log into your site, how much harder is it going to be for somebody else, right? There are a lot of two-factor authentication plugins out there available. Clef is the one that I tend to see come up a lot. I don't have a ton of experience with these, but it's the one that I see referenced a lot. That is pretty easy to use, apparently. You just kind of, I believe the way it works is that it gives you a sort of app or something on your phone, and then you just kind of scan the screen, as I understand it. Really good, because two-factor authentication is fantastic because even if somebody gets past all the other stuff, and even if they're able to get the username and password, this is still a line of defense. So that's awesome. CDNs and Cloudflare have been mentioned today, and this is not necessarily something that I think everybody needs to do, but it's something you definitely can do, and it comes with a lot of nice features as well. Cloudflare is a CDN, a content delivery network. It's essentially a middleman between your domain and your server, or your client and your server, I guess. So ordinarily, the way things work, super duper abstracted. I know there are probably people in the room getting their actually fingers ready, but at a very basic level, what happens is your site types your URL into your browser, it goes to the server does its stuff, and sends the page back to the user. Cloudflare, or a CDN, or whatever, it's a sort of middleman service. So Cloudflare is capable of doing lots of things. For one, kind of helping to prevent brute force attacks or DDoS and that kind of thing. It also has a layer of caching. So it acts as a CDN. It helps to serve your site faster. It helps sort of obscure your IP address and lots of other stuff. They have plans all the way from free to crazy expensive enterprise level. But it can be a really good option and has some nice free features along with it. And finally, and as you've undoubtedly been waiting for me to say this whole time, Use a good host. A good host will make all the difference. A lot of this stuff I've mentioned today, a good host will help take care of for you. A good managed host will generally have security features, plus things like support if you have questions, emergency response if something does go wrong. They'll keep site backups for you so you don't have to worry about that kind of thing. All of those sorts of things that you might not think about until it's too late. A good host will take care of the things that suck. We all love WordPress, but getting WordPress set up and running on a server and taking care of all the administration with it, it's not always fun. So a good host will abstract that from you and let you just focus on doing what you want to do. This is not a sales pitch. Obviously, I wholeheartedly and as objectively as possible recommend Flywheel, but there are a lot of good managed hosts out there, and I think it's a very good thing to use any of them. And they will make your life better, I promise. That's it. That's all I've got for you guys. Any questions about any of this?
So, do you remember like Edward Snowden and stuff like that?
Okay.
He said that passwords that are 12 to 14 characters are actually really easy to bust, and so he recommended about 34 to 40 characters for a password.
Edward Snowden recommends 34 to 40 characters for a password. Well, he seems like a guy who would know more about hacking and stuff like that than I would. Look, if you're using a password manager like LastPass or 1Password, it literally makes no difference to you how long your password is. Absolutely none. It could be 2 characters or 200. You'll never know the difference because it's generating and saving all of them for you. LastPass even has a really cool feature where it will A, warn you if you're using the same password on multiple sites, and B, it can even auto-update passwords in batch for you for certain sites, which is really cool. So I got really irritated at my credit card company because they wouldn't allow me to use more than 14. Why? You're a credit card company. You're literally the example of a company that should be secure. But yeah, I wholeheartedly say the more the better. Yeah.
I think the reason, this isn't a question, this is kind of candid.
Sure.
I think the reason that this suggestion is at least 10 or 12 characters is if you are trying to keep these in your memory, you'll remember that range better. But also, every time you add a character, that makes your password like exponentially more secure.
Sure.
So somebody could hack into a 4-character password in seconds. Somebody could hack into an 8-character password in hours, etc. So every character kind of makes it exponentially harder to hack into. So like a 12-character password is still like pretty good, but like a 40-character password, you'll probably be there until the death of the universe. Hack into it.
All right. So if the aliens are coming and they're trying to hack our password, we're going to make sure the sun gets them first.